Hey, we are live with Travis Gibb once again. Welcome everybody to yet another. Woo! Welcome everybody to another Wine and Comics Pairing show. And welcome today, Travis Gibb. You might notice there are only two of us on screen. Dallas, unfortunately, will not be joining us late either. He got stuck traveling. He thought he'd be available. I think he's just in a car somewhere. And, you know, it's Thanksgiving week here in the States. He's on the East Coast. I don't know where. I've heard the weather is really bad over there. I don't know what it's like in Florida, Travis, but I know there's like they were expecting storms all up and down the coast and whatnot. So,
yeah, we're okay here. It's northern. I got off the phone with my brother today, and he's talking about some stuff coming up that way out in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Oh, should I pour? Should I pour? Because I came prepared, Dave. I saw the wine.
Yeah, pour. Pour.
I got myself a Shutter Home Cabernet. I got the small bottle.
Nice.
I am not a wine guy. The only wine I really like is the Federalist. Have you ever tried any of the Federalist? I really like the Federalist.
I have, yes.
I like that. I am a little biased because I do have a book called The Federalist, and I'm a huge Hamilton fan. But I'm ready. I'm going to drink some wine with you. I dated. Well, since my wife's not here, I can tell a story because she won't watch it. She knows the story, but before my wife, I dated for about 9 months a dancer, not a stripper, like an actual
right.
You got to clarify these things.
A dance troupe, modern dance, something of that
nature.
No,
she was a dance instructor, and she did nutcrackers and all that stuff, and that was our thing. We'd buy. We would buy the most expensive wine and the cheapest wine that we could find, and we would try to see what's better. And a lot of times, a cheap wine would taste better than some of the expensive wines. Obviously, when you find a good expensive wine, it's completely a different game, But 9 times out of 10, if you're getting like a $30 to $40 bottle and a $10 to $15 bottle, a lot of times you're like, this $10 bottle is fine. We're good.
No, 100%. The cheap wines that I find that I love, are nearer and dearer to my heart than the expensive. Like the expensive stuff are like really cool in their own way, but it's like you get what you pay for. So it's in a sense, it's not as impressive. You know what I mean? Where it's like, right, I paid $75 for that bottle or $50, whatever it is, or God forbid, 3 digits or 4 digits. I've never ever paid 4 digits for a bottle of wine to date. I don't think I ever will. I would feel bad if I ever got to the point where I could do that and not feel it. You know what I mean? Like I would be like, oh, I'm living life in a bad way if I have that much I'm just sitting on that I can just spend $1,000+ on a bottle of wine and like not think anything of it. I have done very, very low triple digits for a couple of bottles. And, I got to say, it's always, once you hit triple digits, it's always disappointing in its way. It can't live up to it. It's just the wine itself can't live up to those price points. It's only like, well, but now I've tried blank. I've tried X. And it was always going to be that expensive. So if I ever wanted to try it, I had to pay that much. And I'm glad I experienced it. But the wine itself is not something that I feel like it wasn't a discovery. It's not something that's special to me.
Right.
It's the wine that's special to everybody. And that's why they charge 3 digits for it or 4 digits or whatever.
We would get a few when I was dating her of the 3 digits. So her dad is really well off. He is he's one of the, your kid. I don't know if you have kids, but I'm sure you remember taking pictures in school. Either way, if you don't get, he runs that in this area. So like all the school, so he gets the big money for that. And everybody's got to do it. You got to you just get buy your kids picture. It's just fact. Like this doesn't matter.
Wow.
So he was
that is one of those jobs that you don't think about, and then you're like, oh right, there's always a demand for it, and there is always the one person that you see year after year. Like it's not like there's I don't know how many there. I'm sure one person can't cover beyond a certain point. Like it's a certain school system and they're like, okay, these are my schools. And then someone else covers the others. But, there can't be that many people doing it. So you don't meet them very often. I don't think I've ever met anyone that did that job. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So he would buy us bottles of wine like that. So I live where I live. I live in Melbourne, Florida, which is right by the beach. So we're where the whole area is beach and beautiful and nice. That's kind of always where I've lived. I've always lived by the ocean. Like, it's very important to me. I don't really go to the ocean, so I don't know why it's important to me, but it's important to me. So we would go out, on the water, and we would have, $100, $200 bottle of wines, and he would tell me how fancy it was, and I was like, I would love a Guinness or a PBR.
Right. I was gonna say, yeah, the only time I'm from Michigan originally, so lakes were always like the bodies of water that I knew better. I did live in Florida for 2 years and lived right on Jacksonville Beach, so it was like right on the waterfront. So I got 2 years of my life living by sea, and it was a Navy family, so we were always near bodies of water, just not really like right on the water, except for in Florida. We were on the water in Florida, but I was much more. My whole extended family's from Michigan. So we'd go there for summer vacation and whatnot. We'd visit them all the time, always the lakes. But we were always like on a float boat with, Bud Light, with my grandparents. Like, that was as fancy as it ever got. And they would let me, and as a kid, they were very casual about it. They're like, "Oh, you want to taste it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, no, it's disgusting. Which is a kid,
and that's because it's Bud Light, not because it was a bad beer.
Probably, yes. Yeah, but of course then I was like, "Oh, I'm never going to like beer." But, I felt that way about black coffee. That changed. I felt that way about wine for the longest time. That changed. All these things are things you develop palates for if you want to. It's just and then you commit enough time to it that you learn what it is you're drinking, what those ranges of quality are, and then you find the shit you like and you ignore all the stuff you don't, and away you go. Exactly. But and I'm a little late on this comment, but when you sneezed right at the very beginning, Stephen Prince, he's joining us today. Bless you. Hey, Stephen. Good to see you, my man. But okay, we are. I thought
it was just a Steve who was super religious, and like he blesses your program every time you start, and it's well,
it's funny when you were talking, I didn't notice the comment until well after you sneezed, and I read it, and I was like, "Oh, what did we say?" Where he's like, "Oh, bless you," and I'm like, "Huh," and I had to think about it, and I'm like, "Oh wait, you sneezed right at the very oh shit, that's from the very beginning." Oh well. Missed that comment until it was a little late. I'm not the best at moderating comments, but I feel that's true for most of these shows. It's like there are parts of the show where you get to the comments, and then there are parts where you just kind of ignore them for a little while.
Yeah, if the person's engaging, do you really
that's true.
You really care about the comments, right? Like, you care about this part, and then the views and all that other shenanigans is secondary,
Right. Absolutely. But we are here today just to intro this properly before we start going off on diatribes and whatnot. We are here specifically to talk about Granite State Punk, which is, my favorite comic from Travis. It was the one I discovered him through. I believe the first Granite State Punk was my first comic from you. And from there, I started to, reverse engineer what Orange Cone Productions was and all the titles that you had and all the things you were doing. But Granite State Punk was the one where I was like, ooh, this looks totally up my alley. It is essentially Granite State is New Hampshire, for anyone who's unaware of that nickname. So it's a New Hampshire punk. It is the punk rock scene meets like wild black magic. It's kind of like one thing that like in my head, I've called the comic this to myself for a little while, but it's basically like the fuck you meets the supernatural. And that's those are the two genres, if I had to call them two genres. And it's a great blend, but it's a quirky blend. It is very much, I feel like this is the comic, and I think you feel the same, because I know we've had a few online conversations where you've been like, oh yeah, this is my favorite. This is also kind of, not that, all your darlings are darlings, but at the same time, this one might just be that little bit like extra personal, extra close to your heart for certain reasons. Which I'd love to, we're definitely going to talk about today. Yeah. And for me, what I get from it is that, I've also been reading your Substack, which, by the way, I'm going to, for everyone listening in and putting it here in the chat, let me just grab, this is travisgibb.substack.com. Travis has been posting this I'm a Loser Baby, So Why Don't You Kill Me series of very personal posts, which I actually think go really well with what he's doing with Granite State Punk. It gives you some insight into his background before he became a writer in part 1, and then in part 2, really sort of those beginnings of the era when he was becoming a writer. but you can get so in Granite State Punk, you know, the main character Zeke, he's just fresh out of prison in the first one shot in the first issue, and he's kind of like picking back up. He's got an ankle monitor. He can't actually go far from home, so he's stuck at home, and he sort of has to re-embrace his roots, for lack of a better, and his roots come with a lot. So that's where the supernatural come in, and that's where the fun comes in with this one, on top of what's the personal and the quirky and the punk rock element, the punk rock ethos of the whole thing. But first thing I want to ask you, Travis, like, because there's a lot now that I've been reading your Substack, and now that I know a little bit more about your personal backstory, I can see a lot. Like, this is not, Granite State Punk is not a truly like autobiographical anything. Like, you're not right. Like, it's not your story, but you can get a lot of the same feeling reading your story in the Substack and then reading Granite State Punk. I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of the same spirit of who this guy and where he's coming from and what he's struggling through. I feel like there is a definite connection there that I have not gotten as clearly from your other work, which, you know, is much more, you know, those are stories that are their own stories. Whereas this one, even the style of the comic, which is, you know, has this stream of consciousness element to it, you know, where you're just like, your main characters just, sometimes there are rants, there are monologues, there are diatribes, and it's really a part where you just get to, like, under the guise of this Zeke character, and some of it is the Zeke character, and some of it is definitely you expressing certain idea or thoughts that you had in the past. Like, sometimes I feel like what you're expressing is like who you were at one point in time versus who you are today. But talk about this comic, where it came from, and how this connects to you on that personal level, because I feel that's a key part.
Yeah, it's wild. So there's two origin stories, which is kind of weird. So there's two separate origin stories, but they meld together beautiful. And you're absolutely right. And when I write those, I'm a loser baby. Like, I really channel my Zeke. You know, I channel my, like, I have to tell this story because that's how I tell stories that are tragic. Like, this shit's really weird for me. I don't know how to tell you this without, like, making a joke about it, because if I don't joke about it, you're gonna think I'm not better. Like, you're gonna think, but does that make sense? Like, if I tell you, hey, my parents were drug addicts, like my parents abused me, I went through a lot of things, I was molested, all, like, if I don't make a joke about it, stuff. And it's not like you had Richard Fairgraves on here. He does something similar and when he talks about his life and stuff like that. But I need to like say the shocking thing and then just pass through it on to my next train of thought with it. So you can't acknowledge that, because I don't want you to acknowledge that, because we dig into that too much, I'm going to be scared, right? We can't do that. So we got to get it. So there's the two origins for Granite State Punk is one. I was listening to a radio program. I listen to talk radio. I know that makes me old, and I apologize, but for some reason I like it better than music. I like people talking. So locally there's a good one called The Monsters. And this guy tells a story about, he went to his childhood home, and this is a true story. He went to his childhood home, and he asked the owner of the house, hey, can I dig in your backyard? I had a time capsule, and I remember putting it here, and I would love to dig it up. So he digs it up, and he's like, this box doesn't look like what I remember, but, you know, I was young, so maybe it's right. So he goes up to the house and says, hey, owner of the house, you know, would you like to open this with me so we can share and see what's in it? You know, since you were part of this, you let me use your backyard, and this isn't my house anymore. And the woman went all white face and said, those are my husband's ashes. Like, he dropped them out of fear and ran.
This is getting worse.
So when I thought about that, I thought about, wouldn't it be really cool if, like, you had like a time capsule or something, you dug in the backyard and you found out your parents were murdered? Like, that was the original concept. So I was going to write a story with that, taking that one concept of story and really expand on it, make it a murder mystery where, what do you do? Do you rat your parents out? Do you not? This kind of concept of that. All right. So that's part one. So the second origin of this is, and this is a weird time to talk about it, but my mom died on this day, like I don't know the years, 5 or 6, 7 years ago. It's the day before Thanksgiving. she passed away suddenly. So my mom, we kind of share about it a little bit in the Substack. She was an alcoholic most of her life. She went into AA about when I was 18, and she was clean and sober. Well, when she was clean and sober, she did cold turkey, no nothing, right? No painkillers, no nothing. Well, she had some neck problems from an accident she had when she was a little younger, and she also had an ulcer that she found, but it was benign. My mom was an avid smoker, so we had got it checked, and it was benign. Well, she got the surgery finally after years and years of pain. She just couldn't take it anymore, and the ulcer started leaking inside of her, and she couldn't feel it because of the painkillers. Everyone around her, my brothers and my stepdad, were like, you just haven't been on Percocets in a long time, and you're feeling it extra hard. It's your body trying to do it. And that's a true thing. Like if you take away like alcohol for, a few months, and then you have a beer, you're going to lose your tolerance, and you're going to lose like how it feels. So she suddenly passed away on Thanksgiving Day. And it was very tragic. And the day before Thanksgiving, I had to fly up there and everything. A couple years later, my dad died of a fentanyl overdose. So my dad being a drug addict, that was fentanyl overdose. And then my grandmother, which isn't tragic, she was 96 years old. It's okay that she dies.
Always sad when you get that close to 100 to not make it to 100, but the chances are so slim. So yeah.
But I was really close to my grandmother. My grandmother was always trying to keep us afloat, protect our family, do all those things. And she had left us some money. So she had left for my dad when my dad passed away, and the money got split for my three brothers. And I got a decent amount of money, and I was like, man, I would just like that. I'm sure you feel this way too. Sorry, my wife just came home.
No worries.
I'm sure you feel this way too. You'd like to always do one book just the way you'd like to do it, right? The artist that you'd like to pick, the artist that we always compromise. It's just reality because we can only afford so much. You've already told me you can't afford 3-digit wine, so you're not going to be able to afford a 3-digit artist on the regular, right?
Right.
So I was like, I need to do this book, and I'm going to pay for it with that money. I also just had a son, and I realized that I had hated New Hampshire. I had grown to hate it because every time I go there, I have to deal with death, and I'm just sick of it, and it's exhausting. And I literally said, fuck it. I don't want to go there ever again. There's no reason. My brothers like Florida. They'll come down. They have kids in Disney. We're good. Like, I don't need to go to New Hampshire. Like, it's not that great. So we decided to, I decided that I was done with it. And then I had a son, and I was like, oh, I need to show my son where I came from. That's going to be super important. So as I started writing this book, it naturally became about New Hampshire, and I started cutting out the elements of the crime and all that, and started ranting, and I was like, all right, cool, I want to make a punk rock. I knew I wanted to make it punk rockish, but I didn't think I wanted to break the fourth wall. But I was like, all right, let's break that fourth wall and let's rant. And then I realized I was healing, ranting about the things I don't like about New Hampshire, but also the things I love about New Hampshire, right? Because all the hypocrisies of a state that's live free or die, or don't wear a seatbelt, like all these hypocrisies really make me laugh. And I love to talk about.
I love too that there was, because there are two diatribes where it's like, at first he talks about how strictly regulated the spirits, the alcohol.
Right.
But spirits, and then he's like, but we're live free or die. And I'm like, are you? I'm like, that's a state where the state sells you alcohol, and sure they don't, and then says then you don't need to wear a seatbelt. I'm like, wow, that's a weird combo, but okay.
Right. And you have to buy it on it's normally like by a highway to make it like connected to more places. Like, it's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing. It's level, even like there's Republican and Democrats there, but like the Democrats there aren't doing the progressive stuff that Massachusetts is doing. They're just like, hey, we really like parks. Can we get more of them? Like,
although frankly, don't get me started on Massachusetts either. We just did a show with a comic company based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and they have their own wine brand. They made wine based on their comics, but it's only available in fucking Massachusetts because the distributor can't send it out of state. There's a law against it that prohibits it completely. It's one of those states, and I'm like, you're killing me. So yeah, it's every state is such a weird, quirky, love-hate bundle of bullshit that is so hard. Like, you have such torn feelings. You can get used to it, but that's not the same. And then it's a question: do I love that or hate that, or am I just used to it? What are we like? How do I feel about this place?
Yeah, so I use it as a processing of it. Zeke is, going back to what you're saying. Yeah, Zeke is absolutely the closest to my voice, like of what goes on in the head, right? Like I'm not as ranting, but younger me was a lot more ranting.
We were all that way when we were younger.
Right. And I do have a little bit of anarchist in me, and I do have a little bit of like fight for the, and anybody who follows me long enough on the internet, like if there is injustice that I feel I need to get involved in, like it is sure. I don't care.
It's
like
on.
I do it less and less as I get older, but if you go back in the archives of Travis Gibb, you'll see like
the joy of the next generation coming in is you're like, yeah, you guys take over. Great. It's like you've got the energy. We're all starting to age. Like, we have our moments, but I think that, that never ending, like just that tank that refilled itself when you were young. We don't have that anymore. Once you get to a certain point and you're like, no, now it's time to pick and choose. We still have our moments. We still have things that are very important to us, but we can't be that, we can't be that everyday warrior that we used to be.
Well, and don't trust anybody over 30, that's always been a thing, and once I hit that point, I was just like, you just can't trust me anymore. Like we're just at that level, but it's been interesting because I've seen there was a trans kid who came up to me who read Granite State Punk one, and he really felt it identified him in his identity as trans. Like, and I was like, I definitely didn't write that in there because I don't try to speak to communities that I don't know.
Right.
But I really loved, like, I was like, please tell me more about this. How? And it was just that he doesn't know who he is. Like, there's all these things, and he wants to block out everything to be this version of himself. Right. And anybody who reads a book and really gets deep into it can tell that he has a flawed persona of who he is. Like, he puts up that front as often as you want. Whenever there's another character in the scene, there's a front, and it was really interesting to put that up and be able to talk to this kid and experience. And I was like, dude, awesome. Like,
well, I love how in the comics, this is something I always like. As you get older, you realize all people are, or almost all people are actually like this, which is that, like you said, the front. And then whenever he's not putting up the front, we get his thoughts. We get most of the comic is the inside of his head, and he's very introspective. He's very thoughtful. And then the moment someone talks to him, it's like he's never had a clear thought in his life. And it's just instant front and instant. And you're like, you would think this guy was brain dead if you just spoke to him externally, because that's how it's like and I feel like with him, it is like almost force of habit. This is just what he's given for so long. He resorts to it as a fallback when he has to interact with people. And of course, we're all I think a lot of people in the comics world, a lot of creatives tend to be as good as we might be in a room and with people. We're all introverts at heart. There's a reason we can create in our own little bubble and go to that bubble and be very happy there for long periods of time. And so we recognize that, we're most ourselves, or can most explore who we are when we're by ourselves versus when we're surrounded by other people and when we're interacting with them. I think that's a skill you learn later in life, where you're like, you know what, you do learn more about yourself with other people too. It's a whole nother side of that, but that's something you've got to kind of come into and learn how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those are conscious decisions, definitely in the book and the way I write it and the way I've done it. I know you've read, did you get a chance to read the 12-page of Coven?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. In the next one we introduce. So early in the series, we've introduced a couple of times a young Zeke, and showed young Zeke.
Right.
Never really had. He may have a dialogue too, but we've never really let him speak.
Right.
And then we introduce a different young Zeke in this one, who has very different opinions than Zeke, and very different opinions of Zeke. which is very much your youth talking to your adult person and being angry about that stuff.
Right. You sold out. You've betrayed everything we were about, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it makes sense of the choices that I made early on, identifying, one of the things I do with Zeke is I don't have them wear a band shirt very often. And that's intentional because, old punks don't, because they don't want to sell out. They don't want to do, there's all this weird stuff that punk rock guys like have. And I'm really, I'm going to even expand that in the next issue, a little spoiler here. We're going to have all these Zeeks sitting together and have a conversation about where they're at and the different selves, including me as the writer, and mocking me, going, I'm not very punk, because I wasn't very punk. I was one of those, again, and now that you've read my 2 blogs, so I'm sure this is not going to come as a surprise to you. I was one of those guys who need to fit in all tribes. So I was, grunge at the most, right? There you go. The flail around your waist is as far as I'm going to go, because I need to fit into all these tribes, because if I don't fit in, they'll realize that I'm a loser, and they'll realize that I shouldn't be around. And I talked about this recent one, how I went to all these schools. Well, that helps out tremendously when you go to middle school and high school, because I know a couple of people from everywhere who remember me, right? So I don't need to do that. You guys have got to meet all these new people. I'm king of the castle. I know everybody. I could really use that. So social was so more important to me than it ever was, education.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So when you do the Granite State Punks, so you've done the one you're doing right now that's on Kickstarter right now is the 3rd one shot for this. And first question, do you foresee this series forever being a series of one shots? Are there any plans for anything greater, more robust than that? Or is this something where it's I will just keep revisiting this, but it's always, you're pretty sure it's going to be in the form of one shots?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be on one shots. And let me tell you why. Going back to the original story, I never thought I was going to read it too. That was literally the artist that I wanted. I wanted Patrick Buermeyer. I think he's a fantastic artist. I think he's amazing.
Yes. And he is perfect for this.
Absolutely,
there's no question about that.
It came to me, or it was him or Alex Cormack were my 2 choices. I didn't tell either of them, but it was him or Alex Cormack, because I think Alex Cormack could do it as well. Mm-hmm. But I saw more of the punk in the colors that Patrick does versus the colors that Alex do. Right. Not that I don't love Alex's color. His colors are way more horror, and I was like, I need it horror, but I need it bright. I need it. I need the 2 together, and they got to mix beautifully. Right. And that's why I give him, giant leaf monsters or giant golems that glow or ghosts that glow to let him do it more punk rock than stuff. So coming out with the second one was kind of out of nowhere, but then I really thought about the way the direct market works. Okay, the way the direct market works: issue 1, let's say it sells 2,000 copies. Issue 2 is going to sell 1,000 copies. Issue 3 is going to be 7. Well, if I do it as one shots, I have a better chance of keeping that one number higher, because they're all going to be number ones. Right. So it helps me in that message. It puts it out in a different way. I try to write them that you don't need the other. And in fact, I just had this proven the other day. Someone's like, "Oh, dude, I read Granite State Punk. It's so good." He's like, I love Goody Cole. I think she's I was like, "Oh, no, you read Breaking Edge." And he didn't need it. He didn't need any of that information. Great stuff. Like that's what I want. That's the goal. But until people tell you.
That is really interesting. I because I've read all 3 and I did start at the very beginning, I didn't think about how standalone they really were. But you're right, that Zeke's character, you could start at you could read these in almost, except for a panel or 2 where they reference what happened in the previous issue, kind of a thing. It's so funny. In Breaking Edge, there is that one moment where he's like, I killed my girlfriend who turned out to be a this, who dot to dot. And I'm sure that other person was like, yeah, okay, that's a backstory we don't really know about, and just kept going, because you don't need it. It's just a reference for those who did read the first one. But they are all, you get to know. Right. You don't see anything about that either. Right. Well, and I, coming into this interview, there was one question. I almost went back. I almost pulled out the comic again, because I was like, did he ever say why he was in prison?
He did.
You did? Okay, good. I was like, oh shit, did I just not read very carefully? I feel like I'm about to enter this interview and I don't know the answer to this. But okay, you didn't answer that.
I have an answer,
Yeah.
but the real creative answer, you know, when we talk about creative stuff, is I had that vision of the beeping monitor being chased by a monster, and it was just so good. Like visually in comics, you know, that's what we need to do visually in comics, you know, because I'm trying to make this character. You know, it's very easy to compare him to John Constantine. You know, anybody's read it, especially John Constantine has the punk phase in England.
Yeah,
but
starting with the second one at least. The first one, he's so out of his element. I feel like that was right. But then starting in number 2, that's where he's like, okay, this is who I am. Now, what do I do with this? How do I accept this? How do I embrace this? And that's its own question, right?
The big difference is going to be, as I do this, he will never learn how to be good at magic. I promise you. Never
That's kind of good. I'm
even though he has everything stuff, I will never allow him. That doesn't mean he won't be able to do some stuff periodically. Right. But that's what separates him from Constantine as a whole, as well as the way I write the book. But going back to Constantine, that's one of the, because obviously you can see the inspiration. Anybody's read Constantine can see the inspiration.
Especially
one of the things I love about
Constantine and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Is every time a new writer came in, you didn't know what the hell was going on. Because that's what he did. Like, he was so good. And I believe that if you start at most arcs of John Constantine, you don't need to know anything else. You don't need to know anything about him to read that arc. Obviously, at the end, you know, because Vertigo used to do these, you get 5 years on a book and then you can have an epic ending.
Right.
Probably can't get those last 2 graphic novels and know what's going on, but the first 10, you're good.
Right. Well, it's funny. You would... because I caught when I first got into John Constantine, I think it was the Ennis. No. It was right after the Ennis era. It was Paul Jenkins when he came on board.
So good.
And I started reading with him, and there was so much that I didn't realize was referencing both the Ennis and the before him, crap daddies. Why can't I remember it? Jamie Delano.
Jamie Delano. Okay.
Jamie Delano. So those were the 2 runs prior to that one. And when I finally went back and read those runs, I was like, oh, son of a bitch, these are whole storylines. They actually did these stories. And I just assumed they never did. I thought it was just a dropped reference. And you're like, yeah, okay. And then you keep going. But yeah, I do think in that Vertigo heyday, because even Paul Jenkins, like the final couple story arcs he did, you would have been so lost if you had just tried to read those. Because it wraps up his whole, everything up to that, you're kind of good to go. Then you get to the end and he's like, I'm wrapping up everything in my 3 to 5 years on this title. And that gets to become impossible if you're not actually reading along. But I feel like that ship is, I mean, Vertigo kind of doesn't exist anymore. We'll see if they bring it back. But that ship has largely sailed. Now you're like 1 year at most is all you're doing with Constantine for most writers.
Yeah, you're getting like a trade, or you're getting the washed down version that's in the DC universe, you know, which is not the same, you know. Nope. Like the Brian Azario run, you know, one issue he's dealing with dog rapists, and the next issue he's in prison, like trying to get a cigarette, and they are not connected, and they were 100% connected in every single way when you get to the end.
Right. And when you get to the very end. Yeah.
That's what made that character so good and so special. Right. So
I feel like that's Azarella's specialty too, because 100 Bullets was essentially that. It was like all these disparate story arcs that you were like, they're all just following a different character, but then as it kept going, as you had to get really deep into it, and then it started weaving them all together for a grand finale. But you had to stick around to actually get to that point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So also with Granite State Punk, this is the series where you know, it's great that you mentioned that Zeke is basically kind of a John Constantine style. That was weirdly, that did not cross my mind. I don't know why. I'm such a huge Constantine fan. I know. I was just like, oh, son of a bitch, that is basically but you're right. Constantine was so methodical in how he got into magic and how he fell into the supernatural. And then no matter how much he fucked up, you know, he is that guy who's like always kind of in control. Right. Even when he's not in control of the situation, he's gonna fake that he's in control. And Zeke is like 100% the flip mirror inverse image of that, where he's like, I'm never in control. I don't know what the fuck is going on. All you assholes are the ones that are doing this shit, and I'm just along for the ride, and I hate it, rather than wanting to embrace it and all that. How much of this is, you know, the thing that I loved most about, even from the very first issue of Granite State, we mentioned about how this is a little bit of your inner thoughts, or your inner thought, your style of your inner thoughts from one point in your life. Yeah. So there's a lot of like that Kevin Smithy, Tarantino, you know, these sort of like monologues that happen, and these great, like, even when nothing's really much happening on the page, Zeke is going off, and he's just like, this is everything I'm thinking about right at this moment. And you take all that time in the comic, and these are one shot. These are not oversized, really oversized one shots. They're like 30 pages, 32 pages at most.
They're not. They're 24. 24. This is the biggest one. 28 is the new one.
28 is this one. Okay. So they're all relatively like short, and you'll still take whole pages to just be like, we're just following Zeke and going off on this thing. When you do those, I guess, was that a style when you went into Granite State Punk originally? Did you know that that was going to be the style of this comic, or was that a surprise? Was that something you discovered when you actually started writing it?
So yes, and no. So when I got the money, and I could do a comic book. Well, my grandmother wasn't that well off. Well, she let me revise that. She was that well off, but I had to split it with 2 other brothers. So my cut wasn't that. And this may surprise you, Dave. I've gathered debt in my years that I had to pay. So what I did was I was like, this is what I would tell if I was doing a 4-issue miniseries. Like Granite State Punk 1 is basically Voodoo Nations. It's not the same plot, but like Voodoo Nations is the same condensed of a plot, but over 5 issues. I was like, I need to tell a 4-issue miniseries in one shot. I need to make it as intense and as powerful as a one shot. Throw it in and make it the best book I can possibly make for one shot, because this is all the money I'm ever going to have to make this thing. That was my belief, you know, because at that time I was only making $5,000 Kickstarters at the most. The big ones were like Cthulhu and stuff, but the Voodoo Nations were only 5 to 6. You know, you couldn't really have that. I couldn't really afford Patrick. You know, he's an expensive guy, and you know he's worth every penny. So doing that and trying to make it, so I could only afford. So I packed as much as I could, because this was going to be my one love letter to New Hampshire.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, I don't want to ever not write this character. Like when you ask, Dave, I am never, as far as I'm aware, as long as Patrick will draw him, I will continue to write this character. In fact, I am even going to do a one shot with the Goth character, because so many people love Eugene and do Granite State Goth. And as you may have realized, I used to be a LARPer. So I think I can do it. I got some stuff in there, and try to keep the feel of New Hampshire that I've created with a Gothic character, but he can't be Zeke, right? He can't articulate like Zeke, because that's not going to work, right? So how do you do that? How do you write that story? But yeah, so every issue is, I think of what I would do for a miniseries, and then I rip it apart and make it a 4-issue, a one shot. In fact, those 12 pages that you read, lots of stuff happened. We haven't even gotten to the plot yet.
No, I know. That was part of that. I mean, I feel like you're almost leaning harder and harder into that approach to the whole thing, because in the 12 pages I read, which is almost half of the bloody comic, and it's all just, I mean, there are now, to your credit, you gave a couple of really big visual moments in those 12 pages, which the other ones were less, like, I felt like this one leaned harder into that too, more than the previous 2 one-shots, in terms of just like the atmosphere and the supernatural side of things. And like, it was creepier than normal than for the first 2. But then you still you're like, and now this little kid version of Zeke is going to literally get whole pages to be little kid Zeke, but in terms of plot, do nothing. Like, we're only going to spend some time with him, and you're going to see everything that this kid is about. You get a lot of character in that, and I think it is one of the core reasons people read this book. So it's, you know, this is in no way meant to turn anyone off this series to say like, oh, but he just blows pages on this stuff. It's like, no, that is one of the most I mean, one of my favorite parts. So it's like, if I was gonna, this is why I tell someone to read this book, is like, yeah, you're gonna get all that other shit that you can get in other comics, but you're also gonna get this stuff that, and somehow you marry it together in a way that even as I'm reading, I'm like, there can't be many pages left, and I'm going, but then by the time I get to the end, I'm like, oh, that was great, that was perfect, and it's kind of, it's a dance that you do with this sort of consolidation of the story and what you want to do with the writing and the characters and the voices of them. That is, I mean, it's bloody impressive, because it's one of those things that I know is easier said than done. Is like, you read it and you're like, oh, I could just write stream of consciousness. And I'm like, yeah, you could, but can you write stream of consciousness and loop it into a proper one-shot story with a limited page count and have it just sing in a way like it was meant to be? And that motherfucker.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
So Granite State Punk was the time when I realized that I, without ego being, I'm going to say this, that I realized that I knew how to write. Because there's a part in Granite State Punk where I literally have Zeke stop and I'm saying, you're bored now. I'm talking to the audience. And I've had a whole bunch of people read it and they were all bored there. It's meaning I know the pacing of my book. Like, I can control this. And that's when a writer becomes a writer. When you read these, a lot of rookie comics, they don't know time yet. And that's something you've got to learn, right? A page of a comic, I could have it, if I have a couple talking and they walk in loops, you're going to follow that loop. Even if there's not a lot of dialogue, you're going to follow that loop and stay on that page. Or I could go action-packed and you're flipping through the book like a Civil War or Infinity Gauntlet, right? Controlling that and figuring that out, and I figured it out really well in Granite State Punk. The first one. The second one, I really wanted to tell that Goody Cole story, so I think some of that Goody Cole story got pushed over, so I didn't get as much Zeke as I wanted to. But her story is so interesting that like I wanted to share it, and it's true. Like it's not me making shit up. Like there's a lot of trueness to it, and then of course there's twists and how it connects to Zeke and all that. Of course, to make
exactly.
All
and even how Goody and Zeke bounce off each other, because they both have these backstory. Because I mean, I think that's why it was important to get the Goody Cole backstory rather than just have her be this ghoul, undead thing that comes back. And you're like, yeah, she was branded as a witch in the past, and that's all you need to know. But by getting the full story, there's a lot more, because, it is kind of that thing where it's like, yeah, you can't just go kill all of New Hampshire, but we still feel for you, right? It's like, because there's that element where you're like, we get it. I would probably be the same vengeful fucking spirit if that happened to me and I was undead and then someone woke me back up. I'd be like, oh fuck yeah, I'm gonna go kill everybody. I hate everything. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of earned. Unfortunately, that's kind of earned. So I do think that it was important to do that, and it makes the story work. So yeah, all those types of things in terms of you figuring out how, even if you have any sort of hesitation with the Goody Cole story in terms of like, did that slow things down or did that bog anything down? I did not feel that, but I also think some people, that was their first Granite State Punk. I feel like coming out of the first one, because now you know the style of what these comics are. And so when you get like that scroll and it's the one-page scroll of Goody's backstory, and you're like, this is so like, this is what we do here. So it's like, I'm just along for the ride. I'm not really questioning it anymore but then if that was their first one, they might be like, oh, why am I reading the scroll? Okay. And maybe some people feel like that stops the story, but yeah.
And it's against storytelling rules, right? You're taught with storytelling, show, don't tell. If you're reading comics, show, don't tell.
That's exactly right. That scroll normally would have been the thing in the back matter. Right, where you would have put it back there and people would have read it and been like, well, if you want to know more about Goody Cole, here's a nicely designed page that you don't have to read it. But by sticking it as like, this is the story, you don't get to move on until you read this, because this is going to be important as we go forward. It's going to help you get the right feels as we go forward with everything. And I would argue it absolutely does.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially when you go to the first one where I'm teaching you about New Hampshire and about the Old Man in the Mountain, which is all written. One of the beautiful things about the Old Man in the Mountain story in the first one is my wife goes, "Hey, could you give me the reference to this so I can make sure it lines up before we go?" I was like, "Oh, honey, I made that up." And that was the second time that I knew that I was right. She was looking for the source material to help verify it. I was like, "Oh, there's no source material. That's right here."
There's no actual legend, urban legend, or anything like that. Folk legend of the old man in the mountain.
But it
sounds
lines
perfect
up
too, right?
It lines up history wise. When they found the old man and when they the witch trials, it was like a year and a half apart. And the way there was discovering the areas, it would be take about a year and a half to get and settle. It tracks. But yeah, and then in the in the preview that you have, even when I do this now, I've mastered it. There's a young Zeke comes out at a certain time that anyone who's ever been in love understands, right? Like when you see that person that you haven't seen in a long time, and regardless of whether or not you're supposed to have feelings for them or don't have feelings for or any of that, your heart stops and you've got to, and all of your memories flash back, to it's a whole Meatloaf song. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's all coming back to me now, right? Which is more Steam Beyond, but that's fine.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like you realize in that moment you never got over the person, you just moved on. Like physically, you had to. And so when they suddenly come back, like physically enter your life again, you're just like, I don't. Like then you realize you've never processed it in the first place, and now you're right back where you started from. So let's do while we're here and while we've already talked this much about it, let me share the Kickstarter screen because that is such an important part of these. Share screen. All right, Granite State Punk, the Coven. Here we go, guys. He's almost 4/5 funded. Just shy of almost to 4,000 out of 5,000, 171 backers. I mean, you're still getting great numbers on that. I love that you've got that backing at this point. Although we all know that the amount of money each person can spend these days is tighter than it used to be. So there is that. But here's the Coven. Here is young Zeke with the blonde mohawk. And then I've only just literally the last page of the 12-page preview that I saw. This panel shows up and it's like, we meet all four, end of preview. So that's all I know. I can't tell you anything else. Although this is the Angela, is that her name?
Cassandra.
So Cassandra, this is the love interest that older Zeke. She walks into the room at the last minute on that right before this last moment as well. That's when we start getting the flashback of like, oh, what is Zeke and Cassandra's backstory? Right. So I'm assuming we're about to get that.
And he's made it very clear in 2 issues that he does not give a shit about anybody.
Right. Exactly. Although whenever anyone says that, the I don't give a shit about anyone, you always have to take that with a grain of salt and be like,
right.
Because that is someone who's been hurt by other people, right? So it's like you really give a shit about other people if you've had to go there. If you've had to go to the I don't give a shit about anybody, it's like, oh, dash sensitivity right there. Okay, someone's wounded.
There's some good stuff there.
Exactly. Live free or die. New Hampshire. Is this a something?
Nothing.
Is that a sticker?
No, I just created it. Yeah, I just created it for funds. Made it a basic font and stuff. It is the motto of stuff. It's the motto of Great Stuff. And I think I'm going to make it the monarch of me. Like, because I really believe in that philosophy. And I also realize that it is not possible. And I love it. Like, I love everything about that statement.
Right. Well, I think it's everything like with anarchy, with what like libertarianism, things like that, where it's like there are some good ideas in there, but like the reality of those things, especially if we're all going to live together, like it doesn't work. It never works. And it's like, I mean, if we all want to go back to the like Wild West frontier when we could like shoot each other dead at the drop of a hat, okay, but that's what it really means. I mean, it's like live free and die. It's like, because that is what's going to happen. There's not really an or about that.
And it's a ridiculous model. Like it really is. And like, it's obviously used by the gun nuts on some level, and it's also used as a state. Like, but what I love about it is, unlike "Don't Tread on Me" or anything like that, it's a state motto, so they can't take it, right? You can't don't tread on
Right.
me. It's kind of thing. Like for me, there are people who think like Donald Trump is the best president, like, and we all have to live under this motto. But like when we part ways, you know, like peace be with you. It's live for die, live
Right.
for die. All right, cool.
Right. And this is the cover to the OG, the first Granite State Punk.
Yeah. So when you buy this, just so you know, I don't put many of the scout stuff. I am doing a thing on the update. Right. So if you back it, you may be able to buy some of it, but the scout books are different, and they are slightly different. There is some editorial changes that need to be made. But I don't put any of those on here because these are the orange cone versions of the book. You know, Scout will get them
right.
later date.
Oh, cool. Because I've gotten the Scout books of the first two. Obviously, the third one hasn't come out from Scout yet, but I haven't read them yet. So I haven't seen what the differences are. I've only ever read the OG orange cones. I just have the Scout one. So I'll have to actually sit down with those someday soon.
Yeah, it's not major. It's just some dialogue changes and some stuff, you know.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see if I even notice, if I can even like feel like, wait, this page is different in some way, even if I can't pinpoint what is different about it. But maybe not. I might read the whole thing and be like, yeah, fuck it, I can't tell. This is all the same to me. And this is number 2, Breaking Edge, which, by the way, I will say, if that is actually a phrase, breaking edge, that you didn't invent, I'd never heard of that phrase before.
It is a phrase. Yeah. So when you are a straight edge character, if you're a straight edge guy, so straight edge is, some people just say no alcohol, no drugs and stuff. Some people even say no sex. Like it depends on your level of edgedom. When you decide to just turn all that away and have a nice glass of wine like we are tonight, you would break edge, and that's the term.
Tweet. All right, going on further down. That's number 2, Breaking Edge, and then we get to this one, Granite State Punk, the Coven. And you know, I don't know why I thought this in advance, but when you were first teasing this issue coming out, and it was the Coven, and this was the image for the most part, or like the image of the kids. Right. And for whatever reason, it didn't dawn on me, even though I had seen like kind of young Zeke before. Right. I was like, oh, Zeke has like bastard children out there, and he's going to meet them all in this issue. And that's what I thought was going to happen. And then when I'm reading it this time, and it's so funny because I was like 10 pages into the preview, and I'm like, where the fuck are the kids? Right. I'm like, when are they going to get here? And I'm like, oh, it's the backstory. Son of a bitch. I should have known that. But for whatever reason, I thought that. Now, here's another question for you. And I don't know if it's going to be this issue or if it's going to be maybe in the future. But one thing in your own Substack that you've talked about in your own past is like how much having kids changed you, and how that focused you and, you know, became something that you were very proud of. And it was something that was very critical to you. Is that going to be any sort of a theme or a plot point in Zeke's life, and as far as you know right now?
No, but it's a great idea, and I may steal it. Only because my goal as I create this character, I want to separate him farther and farther away from Constantine. So when I want someone, because I believe that this book could be my opus. Like I really believe it's that good. I bbelieve that everyone should read this book. I think it's a high quality book.
Your first opus. Let's say that.
My first opus, right. But I think it's the character. Like Matt Wagner has done a lot of things, but when he's bored, he always goes back to Grendel. Like, you know, I feel like Zeke could be that stuff. So things like that, where having a kid that would make it, especially if he took care of that kid, would make him very much not John Constantine. Because if you thought John Constantine would ever raise a kid, that's not possible.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't know if you ever read the Mike Carey run on John Constantine, but I don't think that counts. The way he introduced his kids, right? If you remember that part of the story, it was actually kind of a small slice of Carey's run, so it didn't go that long. It was like 10-ish issues or something like that. Like it really was not a long period of time, but it was not anything like having like John Constantine actually has a kid and has to deal with that or raise it. In fact, the closest thing I can think of, this is a weird one, I'd never read the really early issues of John Constantine. I'd never gone the Jamie Delano run. I only read it maybe a year and a half ago for the first time ever. And I went ahead and read the whole thing. And there is a young child that is it's not his kid though. It's someone else's kid, but it becomes somebody that he takes care of for a certain amount of time. It was an interesting story arc. Yeah. But yeah, not the same thing. I think that would really distinguish it. And when I read that on your Substack, and it's funny because I didn't read the 12-page preview until yesterday. So I think I might have read your part 2 of I'm a Loser Baby, Why Don't You Kill Me, and then read the 12-page preview and sat down because I'd reread the first 2 one-shots over the weekend first and then went into the 12-page preview. So I think that might have been why I had kids on the brain when and I was like, oh, that's what you're doing here. And I was like, oh, nope, no, you're not. Oh, well. But yeah,
I can give you a little teaser because I do know you love it. I will get issue 4. We're going to deal with Nazi punks because I don't think you can talk about punk music and not address the white supremacy punk rock scene. That's just a thing. And if you don't know, in New Hampshire, it's called the White Mountains, which is beautiful, kind of beautiful name for the book. I may go F Nazi punks on the Kickstarter version, but the Scout version will be White Mountains. Maybe really start separating the two. Here's what you get over here. Where's you get that?
Here's the artful title that gets around it a little bit, and here's the very punk direct title. Yeah.
So that'll be the next one, and then we'll do. We've got to deal with one of the things. If you're in New England, it's not really a New Hampshire thing, but you've got to deal with pilgrims. So we're going to deal with some pilgrim stuff, and we'll talk. That I'm not really spoiling what it is, but it'll be called the Pilgrim, and we'll deal with the Pilgrim.
Yeah. I think we can see where that might be going. And here are the Coven, the third Granite State Punk, the alternate covers. This is such a great. It's so fat. I mean, I agree with a lot of commentary on this one where it's like an action movie cover. It's a weird cover for Granite State Punk, but it's a beautiful cover.
And I think it feels like if you read the book, it definitely that's
it has a moment,
in the book. And that happened in real life to me, Dave. That happened in real life. So it wasn't a deer. It was my friend. My friend was driving and he hydroplaned and we ran into a tree and I was a passenger and I went through the window. So I have the scar. You can't really see it in the camera, but I have a scar across my eye that I'll always have because of it. And the hospital experience was much like that. I had insurance people going hey, do you want to sue your best friend? I was like, no, I don't want to sue. What are you talking about? Hey, I had cops come in while I was getting stitches saying, hey, were you driving? Because I was sick. I was not 16, didn't have a license. And literally the doctor had to go, you need to get the hell out of here. Everyone was again, these things happen in New Hampshire, small town. Something happened. Yay.
Right. And no seatbelt laws. So it probably happens more often than even other places where, I mean, frankly, it happens often everywhere. When you're
do you know that accidents. Here's the worst thing about the no seatbelt law. You ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You're not required to have insurance in New Hampshire for vehicles.
Are you kidding?
Live free or die, baby.
Oh my fucking God. I mean, look, insurance is a scam. I mean, there is it's such bullshit because what it should be, if you have insurance, I mean, the very fact that your insurance is the one that covers the other, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's wait, when you learn how insurance works, you're like, this is so backwards. This is bizarre. This is beyond bizarre. So I don't disagree there, but insurance as it should work should work in better ways and more straightforward ways. And it should be required because of the costs involved in medical bills. And, you pay every month. It's not cheap to have insurance anywhere. Yeah, that's crazy. So what, okay. So if in New Hampshire, if you know the answer to this, if you don't have to, if you're in, let's say you didn't hit a tree, you hit another car, right? So then, it's two different, if neither party has insurance or if one party has insurance, but the other doesn't, how does New Hampshire, you sue them? Okay.
You sue him. Yeah, my brother just
Lovely.
got in an accident. He was hit. They didn't have insurance. You sue him. However, here's a weird, again, New Hampshire fuckery because they do weird things. Now that guy's had been in a car accident, he now has to get insurance. He can't be trusted to drive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like you know, you're good, live free. Hey,
until you F it up. Yeah.
Die. Like no, like, you need
right.
to get,
if you almost died but didn't die, now you can't live free anymore.
Right. But I mean, the only positive about the whole thing is a lot of times when you just scrape someone's bumper, you either just forgive them because it's going to happen to you at some point, like it should be, like the real world, or you handle it like, hey, can I just pay for that bumper? Let's not worry about it because you just want to be a decent guy and those things. So it is 100% wild. I assume it has to do with the seatbelt law. I assume the seatbelt law, the insurance guys, we will gladly help you guys get insurance, but you guys need to wear a seatbelt. New Hampshire was like,
right. Oh God. Interesting.
Yeah. It's a wild state. It's the most hardcore punk rock state, but it is very not punk rock because it is New Hampshire.
I know. Well, it's funny. When for the very first issue, Granite State Punk, I had to look that up. Also, I was like, "What the fuck is the Granite State?" I'm like, Which state is the Granite? And I was like, "New Hampshire." Okay. I'm sure. Is it the mountains there? Like, what? Do you know where the nickname came from?
Yeah, the mountains up there have more granite than anywhere else in the 50 states.
Yeah, so. I figured.
So the mountains that we have, and we have, it's not just mountains. Like there's a bunch of hills that are basically unusable on every highway. I assume at one point, probably before I was born, even they had to probably cut through granite, like massive slabs of granite to build highways because there's big granite like walls on right and left because of the way they had to make the stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why it's like that.
Awesome. All right, and this one, another. Oh, who's the artist on this one?
So that's the Bag Brothers. So it's Sean and I never remember the second one's name. Sean and Mark Bags. They do Expired for me. Their book, and they wanted to do some. They really wanted. They're from Connecticut, so they really want to do a Granite State Punk. Their style isn't super punk rock, but I love this image. I think it really fits, the story.
I think they do really good faces. So this was a good design for them because when you look at the four of these, in these sort of extreme close up, like you get honestly distinct personalities out of each of them and a distinct look that is, on like even on Patrick's cover, it's almost a little bit more of, you have to look closer at like the hairstyle and the dress stick on, and things like that. But they all kind of have like a very similar, like you can see why they're a Coven, why their group is like, yeah, they're all kind of, but here there is something about these faces that I'm like, they seem, they're like, she almost doesn't have any attitude. He's got some gleeful, like but he seems like weirdly happy and joyous in this one, which I do think when he was younger, like he was so into having this attitude that he was very happy to kind of being inside of this sort of punk rock scene. And then these two are almost like more your grunge type, where they're just like pure mood and pure like yeah. And then this is my favorite cover of the bunch. I mean, this is the kind of thing you buy to like hang on a wall because it's such a portrait gallery art piece.
Because of Granite State Punk, I went to Jetpack Comics for Free Comic Book Day, and I saw him there, and he had done a World Tree cover that was really, really good. I'm sure you could see World Tree in this, how they would blend really well together with, and it was a limited color, and I was like, what do you cost? I need a cover from you. And he was the cover I was waiting for. A lot of people were like, when is Granite State Punk launching? He was the cover I was waiting for. Gotcha. Obviously, like waiting for it was worth it. And he was waiting for it. He gave me the one below it too, like because he wanted to do that cover.
Oh, nice. Okay, so he kind of gave you the two types, and he's like, I like them both. And
right, exactly. Well, that's a Rancid cover, which is really good. So that's a map of New Hampshire to the left, and it's
cool.
There's a Rancid cover that's California, and it says Rancid at the top, and
very cool. Oh, I love him. Love them, love them, love them. And here's some of the preview pages. This is Patrick's art, guys, even out beyond the covers.
And that's my high
So
school, and he's been there. He's never seen that building. And I mean, he captured it Dave, I can't even describe. That spacing between him and the door is right. Like, you can't get that from a picture. Like, how?
Right. Well, he did. He did. He
like,
looked at it. I mean, because
right.
Right. I mean, I think though that if you're that level caliber of artist, like perspective, you even from a photo, you're like, you understand what that like, I think to you and me, we look at a photo and we're like, we don't have it dialed in what that angle and what that means in terms of space. And I think an artist who really gets perspective and has mastered that, even from a photo, like that's how they draw it. They're like, this is what that space is. Now I can switch the angle and still keep that proper perspective, that proper spacing. But that is still impressive, especially since you have been there and you're like, that is spot fucking on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can see, guys, this is just, and here's our goth character, by the way, that we were mentioning earlier.
I had never planned on doing him again, but everyone loved him. Everyone loved him in the Goody Cole, in the Breaking Edge. They really they're like, hey, we're going to see Klaus again? I was like, really?
Like, I kind of hate the guy. You sure?
Right. Well, and like I named him Uncle, which it really should be cousin, because Uncle means he's either the mom's brother or the dad's brother. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that was like not me thinking like long term. Like you ever
right?
I wanted someone related to him because I don't think he would open.
I thought he was just a relatively younger brother than the parents, but more than that, you know, I was thinking of him. You know, one thing about Patrick's art is, of course, you know, he has such fine, like, there's a lot of lines in his work, and so there's an element I was like, yeah, he could be a middle-aged goth. I'd buy that. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I can see that. Like, he can be an older, like, he was his mom's brother, but still in the goth scene. So he's just like that sad, aging, committed to the role goth kind of a thing. That's how I took it when you said Uncle.
This is going to get really crazy for me I wanted that shot, but to get to where the action would be and where Zeke's house is, there was no way you could go through that path. So people from New Hampshire are going to be mad at me, but I do have an answer for anyone who's in New Hampshire. I can tell you the route he took. I can't explain why he would go that route, but I can explain the route where
it exists. It exists regardless.
It does exist. I don't know why he would go that way, but
he wanted more time with you know, his buddy, his nephew Zeke. Right, yes, thank you. Yeah, and here's one of the big visual moments: the crash with the deer, and this is a double-page spread, right? Yeah. And it's when you see it blown up. I mean, this is a beautiful piece. My God, I was literally like, I was like studying the tire, like how Patrick, the line, like I was just like, Jesus, how does he? His style is really interesting to me. Like, I keep studying it to figure out how he makes these images with the kinds of lines that he uses. Because
I would love to show you, even though it's not the script's done, like he's done. I would love to show you some of the later pages without context. You know, off air, they are beautiful, Dave. Like, he does some amazing stuff, and it's so crazy with his lines and the action, the way he draws stuff and the way he colors things, because everything has this color palette to it, this like vibe to it. You know, that car you could tell it's not a real car, but it has this weird action to it that adds. It's just the way he does things is so crazy, but. Then he can do that with emotion. Like, his emotional arcs are just as powerful as his action.
Yes, 100%. In fact, because again, most of Granite State Punk are people talking, you know, standing around. So it's like, you've got to be good at making that interesting. Even just like, you know, coming back to this page, which is there's a car approaching and he's getting in the car, but it's things like this where and credit to you as well, as you were talking about pacing, where it's like, have some of this dialogue be, whether it's this page where the car's arriving, he's getting in the car, you know, you've got the adjusting in the rear view, and then they're driving on the path into like an accident. Like, a lot is happening while we're also getting a lot of dialogue, a lot of internal dialogue, a lot of everything. I mean, these are, if you're the kind of person that has ever bitched and complained about the whole decompressed storytelling. Like, this is the comic for you, where it's like,
Right.
we're back to like, let's compress it again and get it all in there and still have room for double page fucking spreads, which is the impressive part. All right, and digital and physical catch-up, you can get all three, obviously, either which method you like, all the variants. Any other...
The collector's kit's really cool. It's a little bit lower. The only one
a little bit lower. Okay, collector's
kit
kit.
right there. So what's cool about that is we give you a virgin metal. I also give you a black and white sketch cover, so it's that cover, but it's black and white with stickers, so you can punkify it. So you can add your own logos and stuff like that, which is cool. And then it comes with a 30-page book. I realized that I have 30 covers for this book, which is insane. But the reason why I have so many covers is because of the Scout release. I sold 3 to Scout, like at their request. 4 stores bought exclusives, and that happened with Break Hands as well. So I have a lot of covers, and I know not everyone can afford all those covers. So I decided to throw together an art book. I'm not really an art book guy. Like it's not something I necessarily buy, but I know people love them. Like people will go over them, and I have Rich Woodall and Joe Smoke, and like I have some big Carmeline. I have some big people doing some of these beautiful art that you can see. And Patrick's covers are something you should stare at. Version,
for a long time. Yes. And just out of curiosity, because I love the punkified sticker set. Have you ever looked into? I remember back in the 90s. There were a couple covers that did this, and I was in love with them. And I've always wondered if anyone's ever looked into whether this is even possible today. They were color form covers versus sticker sets. Have you ever looked into, like, does anyone do color forms that you could make so you could put it on the cover and then like continue to rearrange them later, like it's not a permanent thing?
Oh yeah, I don't know if you could do that. That would be crazy, because you'd have to.
There was a you should look this up after a post this thing, but there was a Superman Lobo color form cover, and it was a Superman versus Lobo rematch, and they gave you like this. It was a big. I was in love with this cover, and you could it was a wraparound cover that you could stick the cover, and they were tiny stickers, so you could like literally create the whole fight. Like in different, like zooming across the city, and the full wraparound cover was just the city of Metropolis. So it was like you were in the air, and like Superman was flying, he was punching, Lobo was doing something, and it was, and then you could rearrange and redo it. And I was just like, oh, this is so much fun. I was like early high school at the time. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. But yeah,
I've never seen that. I when you first showed it, I was like, I've seen that. I don't think I have. I saw it color by number once, which I thought was cool.
Ooh, that's cool. Yeah,
which is color by number. And I saw one that has like the watercolor paints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Like, so like you paint
that's cool. That's cool. I would never do it because I just suck. I'm like, I am so bad. I am
the ones that you couldn't mess it up. It's just the water, and then it makes the color.
I know.
Okay.
Watch me. Watch me.
You'll still mess it up. Somehow the colors bleed.
I gave up trying anything like that. I'm so ridiculously bad. Like, I mean, bad to the point where I stupefy myself. I'm like, how did I mess that up? And I will find a way to make it just look. I mean, it would probably look okay, but compared to how it should look, because they made it like idiot proof, it's bad. Even there, but that is still, I do, and you're right. It's more punk to have the sticker set because it's permanent, and that's why you do it. Is you're like, I'm doing it anyway. It's a sticker. I'm sticking it on that thing. That is how I want that cover. I agree.
The first 2 I drew, I would draw on them. You would pay me, and I would draw on them. But I thought the sticker set would be cooler, because then you have the stickers. And I always felt so guilty drawing on Patrick's stuff.
Yes. I would imagine that. All right, cool. And then how far out are you from the completed issue at this point?
What's
done. The timeline on this guy?
It's done. Mean, we've got the 12 pages lettered. We've got, I think actually we've got most of the book lettered. My wife has to go to edit it. We only gave it a January deadline just because of Christmas and stuff. All it takes is a long day to
good idea.
Brilliant
idea.
But our goal is to hit it. But the printers, I don't know if you know, if you ever try to print something in December, a lot of businesses will print custom postcards and greeting cards. So their printers are busy printing, the
Right.
one time a year it's really busy. So it may take, where it would normally take 2 weeks, 4 weeks to get your stuff.
Well, and for me personally, I just think it's the worst time of the year to like try and get something shipped to you as
Right.
well on time, and then shipping out. Like I've had a lot of people try to fulfill in December or early, and so it's like I'm traveling. I'm like in Michigan somewhere, and all of a
Right.
sudden, and I can't pause. I can pause USPS. I can't pause UPS or FedEx or any of
Right.
that shit. So if you're shipping through anything else and it's being delivered not by the USPS, like last Christmas, I had like an expensive hardcover show up while I was in Michigan, and like there was no way to stop it. It sat outside for a week before I could
Wow.
get back to it, and it was still there. Thank fucking God.
Wow.
But I mean, I literally was ready to write it off as a loss. I was
Well,
like,
you're in California, so like, I mean,
right.
that's impressive.
I know. And it's like, it's Christmas time, which is the time when the package theft is at an all-time high too, because everyone, that is when they know all these packages with valuable items are going around. So I was just like, well, that's that. I'm never going to see that hardcover again. But then I got home and there it was. And I was just like, hi. But ever since then, I've been a real advocate of like, even if you can get the books in, like say mid-December or something, and the printer actually got them to you, I'm like, please sit on them for like 3 more weeks.
Sure.
Wait till like 1 week post New Year's. Now, bomb the mail service with whatever you've got going out, and everyone can deal with it from there. But it's like that mid-December to early January. It's like, it's just not a good time, guys. You don't know if people are home. We don't know if you're home. Oh my God. Did I leave your Substack up there this whole time? That's funny. I didn't actually mean to leave it up there this whole time. But hey, people, that is Travis Gibb's Substack.
Now you know.
By the way, guys.
That's where I'm at.
You should know. All right. This is also Travis's back catalog, the add-on menu. So you can see he's got the Voodoo Nations, the Expired, the Cthulhu Invades, Coins of Judas. No Contest. That's actually a new one. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, that's a book that I co-write with a local lawyer who is also a boxer, and it's kind of a fictional telling about his real life and about courts, and it's fun.
Oh, very cool. And then this is the one that either your wife writes or you write with your wife. So both Cottage Cheese and the Pup Van Winkle is just your wife, right?
Yeah, but both are just my wife. My wife even sings on Cottage Cheese. It's a sing-along comic, has a song with it. It's the whole thing. But I gotta tell you, Pup Van Winkle, it rivals our other sales at cons. It's wild. Like people just love dogs. They just love
really
dogs. You should know.
I agree. Yes. All right. And then, the Holiday Spirits. I remember that one. Okay, cool. Yeah, these are the anthologies, the Holiday Spirits and the Cthulhu Invades. All right. Any last words on the Kickstarter or?
No. I check it out. If you've never checked it out, please do. Always buy the. Basically, this helps pay for it. This is that, and then if I make any money, it's whether or not Scout sells enough or not. This is really just paying Patrick. He costs about that much. With not just Patrick, the printing and the other covers.
Right. Just make sure you're not bleeding money by actually.
Right. There's not a single dime to be made, but I would make this if I wasn't making a dime, because it is literally, it's something special. And I don't say that just because I wrote it. It's written in a way that no other book's being written right now. Hopefully it's written well. I think it's written well. Dave seems to think it's written well. But I write it in a way with passion, and I write it. This is my calling card. Like, I know how to write comics, and I know how to write them in a way that keeps you interested. And these are the comics that I would like to see myself. When you talk about 100%. New exciting ideas, this is the stuff I would like to see. We talked about Constantine and all the runs of that. Right. I'd be reading Constantine. I'd be reading 100 Bullets if there was stuff like that out these days. The only part, James Tiernan's the closest, when he does like a World Tree or the Nice House in the Lake, where he's writing in kind of that old way. It's just not done right now. It's just kind of out of fashion. But I want to bring it back.
100%. And I will say, one of the impressive things, because you've got the other series that you write, which are all demonstrably different in tone, in style, in aesthetic. So you've got that range. which
Right.
is not something you see very often these days either. Usually we're very much in this era as well where I don't read a lot of big two. I mostly do indies these days, so I
Sure.
don't have a lot of experience with like the Tom Kings or the
Donny
trying to think
Cates
of
or
who. Yeah. Like I try, like I don't, I
yeah, right,
almost
sure.
never read any of them. I just hear their names all the time, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing a lot of books these days. But they're often that almost sort of like auteur style, where it's like they got a style, they got a voice. That is what they do.
Sure.
Whichever book they hop to, they're doing that.
Right.
And you know what you're getting. You like them or you don't. That's that. But you're always going to get that, regardless of what they're writing. I'm always much more of the school where I think auteurs have their place. Like there's an element of that where, especially if it's a really unique kind of a voice where no one else is doing that. And you're like, okay, I might not want to read everything they do because it's too much of that same voice, but at least they're a unique voice in and of themselves. But it's always so impressive to me when I find a writer that each work they do, you know, they're bringing something that I haven't seen in their other work. And that kind of range, I think, is far more of a rare, you know, something that I cherish and treasure more than just that auteur thing where I'm like, look, we're all unique individuals at the end of the day. Like, I feel like it's weirdly not that hard to just be you and nothing else. It's another thing to be able to be you, but then also have that craft where you can be what the story demands and
Right.
you can go there regardless of whether that's, you know, something that is deep-seatedly core you or not. And I think that is something that I appreciate now, having read a wide range of your work, is that you're able to do both.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And definitely going back to auteurs, I mean, you need them. You know, you talk about the Peter Davids and the Mark Wades and the I consider the palate cleanser comics, right? When you have this new upstart writer who tried this new cool thing and it destroyed the character, you bring back a Wade or Peter David or a John Byrne, and they're going to be like, hey, everything's fine. Daddy's home.
Right.
This
is what you know again. Right.
Let's get Daredevil back. Like he went off the deep end. Brubaker put him in some weird spots, and we're gonna just fix it, and we're gonna make it all happy again.
Right.
I think that those. I actually think they're far more valuable than we give them credit for. Right? Because they're always like, oh, he hasn't had a good run in years. No, but he's been fixing every book you read for 10.
Right. Making it something. Right. Making it good in a very solid way. You know, in that way where you're like, no one can really object to this. It's just well written, and it's back to the basics of the character. And I will say, even with something like a Peter David, like he at least does have somewhat of his own. Like no one does a Peter David as good as Peter David, and you kind of know what you're getting out of him. Even though nowadays he is definitely an old school style that is kind of comfort food in a lot of ways, and he's done with trying anything too weird. I think he had his era where he was like, everything he wanted to do and did with like the Hulk, and then what he did with Aquaman is sort of like, whoa, what is happening? Like no one's ever done this with these characters. But now that's I feel like now he doesn't really do anything, as you mentioned, as you quoted it, off the deep end in weird places. Like he sticks to like pretty safe places, but then he's got his voice, and you can
well, and what Peter David does well, you know, is he's always like, you care about Polaris. I was like, no, I don't care about Polaris. Oh yes, you do. I'm going to make you care about Polaris. You care about Multiple Man. I don't care about Multiple Man.
Right.
You do. Doc Samson, like, and nobody cared about Doc Samson. Peter David said, you care. You've always cared about Doc Samson.
Didn't they make Multiple Man like the great tragic thing of like X Factor 100 or something like that? And it was like, what the fuck? How?
He has this unique way of going, I know what characters you care about. You don't know what characters you care about. You're the problem, not me.
Right. Well, I think what he does, he's very good at making every character charming and understandable in its way. So you get to know this character, which has been given short shrift through most of its comics life. You know, it's like he's always just, he or she is just there.
Right.
And they serve a plot purpose, maybe sometimes, but otherwise they're just there. And they don't have a lot of character to them per se. And then Peter David will be like, kind of like you do with Zeke and Granite State Punk, we're going to sit down and just spend time with them.
Right.
And that's it. That's how he gets you to care. And I feel like comics forget to slow down the big events and the big storytelling and the plot twists and the reversals and the great tragedies and all those things. And just like before you do any of those things, just spend time with the character.
Yeah.
Nothing's actually happening right now. Let's just chill and talk and have fun. And then when something starts to happen, you're going to give a shit that it's happening, because all you've been doing is hanging out with these characters, and now you care about what might happen when things get rough. I feel like that might be a strength. But
well, no, I think you've explained Spider-Man, right? That's Spider-Man
right.
to a T. You care about the reason why we don't complain at what Doc Ock is or what size he is, if he's fat or he's skinny or whatever. But you know what? If Mary Jane and Peter aren't together, like the whole internet blows up, right? Because we've spent that. Stan did a really good job of spending that time. Right. You know, Gwen Stacy coming back, we get all up in arms because we spent time with Gwen Stacy. We lost Gwen Stacy. We're still not. For the people who've read it, or even if you've never read it, you read Spider-Man Blue, you care about this character on a deep personal level. Right. That bringing it back is offensive to your soul, which is what makes comics beautiful. It's why I love this medium. Is I care about these characters. Peter Parker has more friends than me and will outlive me in those relationships with his fictional friends than I will ever have in my real life. And that's amazing. Bruce Wayne will also do the opposite. He will ostracize more children than I could possibly make.
Right. This is true. It's true. It's funny because the OG dissolution of the Peter Mary J thing is the thing that broke me on Spider-Man, and I've never gone back. But yeah, that old, like that OG, what, One Last Day, whatever it was called.
One More Day. One
More Day.
Yeah.
That was the one where I was like, all right, I'm done. It was a good run. I love, because you're following these characters and watching their journey. And I think it's one thing to, like, if they were going through, if you did it on a character level, they're going through something and now they might get divorced, they might separate, they might, like, this is real character drama. I'm okay with, I would probably be all in on that. But to do it in a weird plot undoing of history way, that's where I felt like, make it something based on the characters, guys. Like, give us something that actually makes us feel why this is tragic. Not just, this is plainly a plot-driven, editorially mandated, like, this needs to happen to raise sales. And it's like, all right, which is, you know, the double-edged sword of comics in the industry and how they work and how they need to raise sales and things. And so you're always going to get those stories that are just going to be about the money.
Right.
And they're going to be big stories. They're going to be big, impacting stories that are only about messing you up so you spend more money. And it's not it's rarely, when those things happen, they do happen, but it's rarely a well-crafted story that you love because of how well-crafted it was. I would throw that out there.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Yeah. Wine. Let's talk about the wine. Let's talk about what I paired with Granite State Punk.
All right.
So, and I'm going to couch this saying, so this is a wine that this is what I've been sipping. It is a red wine. And this is a wine that is called Unicorn.
Unicorn. Okay.
WineSmith Unicorn. This is a unicorn because it is two varietals that you never see alone together in a bottle at the same time. It is 80% Petite Verdot, 20% Malbec. That is a strange blend. For people in the wine world, they're going to know, they're going to be like, that's it? Now, Petite Verdot and Malbec can be like small percentages in other kind of French blends or things like, but these two just like, that's it. You're just getting Petite Verdot and Malbec is like, oh, interesting. So that's why it's called unicorn, is like this is a rare thing to find in the wild, right? It's like, or anywhere. It's like go unicorn hunting, you're not going to find it. But this guy, so WineSmith, this is actually a guy, Charles Smith. I've actually taken, I think on the back of this bookshelf over here, there's like this giant binder right at the top. right there. That's wine chemistry. I took his wine chemistry course, so it's and it's like this multi 16-week course. It was kind of crazy, but learned all about like winemaking. He's a winemaker. He's been in the wine world since like the 60s. He's done major research at university about different grape varietals. He's a consultant still, both in the U.S. He consults for certain chateaus over in France. He's just like an OG wine guy, and he's from California originally, so he's like an OG American wine guy from that 60s 70s era when American wine first took off and became a thing. He loves to fuck with things and like make these weird wines where they're like, yeah, no one's ever done that before, I'm gonna do it. And so he'll do it, and he'll keep effing with it until he finds something that he thinks works. And the thing about Granite State Punk, to me, I think I mentioned at the very beginning that I always define this as sort of like the two genres is like the fuck you genre and the supernatural genre. But it's got that, it definitely has that punk rock ethos. It definitely has, one of the things that I think makes Granite State Punk work is, I would call it the fuck you / what the fuck, let's just do it this way. And, you have these like monologues and diatribes and like the pacing and the flow of the story, it works, but it's its own thing. And it's not what you see in a normal narrative. It's something that only works with you writing it. I'm sure, not to say there aren't like other human beings on the planet that could do something like it, but this is your voice, right? This is you doing something that like, it feels like you're feeling the story out as you're writing it and just really letting it live and breathe on its own terms, as well as having a plan, and you're shaping it to fit that plan, but you're still letting it be its thing and you're still letting it do that thing. And that is, so this unicorn wine, the one thing I will say about it is I don't know how much I actually like it.
Sure.
It is a strange ass wine. And that is not why I paired it with Granite State Punk, because I know I definitely love Granite State Punk. But the reason is that, so this is I had to buy, when I bought this originally, it was such a curious wine. I was like, okay, it was only available as a 3-pack. So I had to buy 3 bottles. This is my third and last bottle. I bought it like a year and a half ago. And every 6 months, I open another one approximately, just to see if like the time makes it change a little bit. It hasn't really. they're all pretty much, I'm like, no. This is still the unicorn wine I remember. Damn it. It is a curious wine. It is such the blend that it is, and this guy, Charles Smith, when he makes it, and the fact that it's called a unicorn because of how rare it is to find out there in the market, and the fact that it is a wine that, I mean, I don't hate it by any stretch. Like I'm going to drink I've drunk the whole bottle of each of these. It's perfectly, it's interesting is the right word, but it's that red that it only exists because someone had to just do his own thing and was like, putting these two varietals together alone in a bottle was just a no-no. It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, that doesn't work. You just don't do it. And he's like, now that you said that, and now I've got to do it, and I've got to put it out there. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like that. When I drink this while reading Granite State Punk, it puts me in the right mindset to enjoy that style of story. I'm sitting there, I'm enjoying the fact that this wine is what it is and is trying to be that breaking the rule type of wine that it is. It makes me enjoy that Granite State Punk has that flavor in it and is this work that is, it's one of those brave things where you did not know, as much as you might love the work or not love the work when it's finished and you did it, like until you put it out there, until other people start consuming it, you don't know if it's working. You don't know if what you've created is a fucking opus, like a masterpiece, like you said, or not that you ever use the word masterpiece in your own, but I'm going to put that word out there, like that masterpiece opus, or is it just that, what's the term they always use? The admirable failure or something of that nature, where it's like, oh, well, I respect that you tried, but this does not work. And this wine falls somewhere in between, but the reason this worked, I had a couple backup wines. I will actually, hold on. I already finished the bottle of this one, but the backup, if you want a wine that's really delicious, there was this other wine that I had. It's a blend. You can see
Okay.
it's got like crazy chemistry equation right there. And
Yeah,
that's
it's trying to be.
yeah. It's 5 different varietals all blended together, but it's got a little bit of funk to it, like this earthy barnyard funk, which I think really gives it that little touch of edge. But it's delicious. It's so fucking good. It's like a finely tuned blend. This also worked. It didn't work as well as the unicorn so I'm going with unicorn as my top choice. But if you can find a blend like this where it's finely tuned in that way, kind of like I was just saying, you're putting all this stuff into this book that's a little bit experimental. It's a little bit like, you don't know if this is going to work, but then all these things, and it needs all those things to be as harmonious as it is. And so that could be, but the unicorn worked for me because it was that, respectable failure where I was just like, even though the comic is not the failure part, they're both these sort of like fuck you experiments that the comic sings, the wine kind of doesn't, but together they just work magic to me. And I really enjoyed reading. I read the second, when I was rereading them, I tried the blend while I was reading the first one. And then I tried this one while reading the second and the 12-page preview. And I was like, yeah, it gets me in the right headspace. It gets me to really focus on what I like about Granite State Punk. So something where it's like off the beaten, go find something unique, or at least unique to you, and try something wild. Go off the beaten path, try it. If you hate it, you hate it. Great. Now you know, but do it. Go out, just like Granite State Punk is that kind of comic where it's like, this is not your average everyday. This is not the kind of thing you're just going to pull off the rack at your local comic shop, on any old Wednesday. Like, you've got to find these special comics. And so this is my wine pairing for that one.
And one of the things you said too is you had to buy it in a 3-pack, and I think that speaks a lot to Granite State Punk, because you've got to really, when you pick up Granite State Punk and you start reading it, you're like, I'm investing a lot in this. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just feels like fluff, and you've got to be all in to do it. You've got to like his you've got to like his voice. Like, that voice has to speak, because if that voice doesn't speak to you, I've lost you. I cannot fix that. Right.
Well, it's funny because to the credit of the comic, like, I am the farthest thing from a punk ethos person. Like, I've never had that super rebellious mindset or anything like that, but I still love this character. So it's like, you don't even have to connect with it on a particularly personal level. I think you're just getting across who this character is and how well he fits into the story you're telling. And that you run with that. It's fun. And more on the nose, I will also say the 3-pack works really well because you do have to buy all 3 Granite State Punks.
Oh, there you go.
No, not just one. You got to buy all 3.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. I think the Coven is the best of the bunch. I really do. I think it's me figuring out exactly the right elements of the New Hampshire history, New Hampshire ridiculousness, punk rock, and the thing that I write the best out of all is love. Like, all my books have an element of love in them. Even Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. You don't even know it's a love story until issue 5. Like, you're like, what? This is a love story? Yep.
Right.
It is. I'm sorry. Because that's the thing that speaks to me most in the world. So it's all about that. And then when you add that element, which I feel is my strength, like, it's all cylinders.
Awesome. And did you have, I didn't actually ask you necessarily to do it this time around, but did you bring anything? I know you're drinking a wine. Did you bring that whole thing where it's like a comic you want to spotlight, and now you're drinking something to go with it? Do you have something you want to mention?
I didn't, but let me see what I got here. I've always got some stuff around me. Like, I've got some. I just actually hid most of my stuff because my daughter's having a sleepover. So let's see what we have right here. Will you stop? I have a little dog that will bark forever until she resolves whatever her issue is. I could have yelled at her last time. She doesn't do anything. I am going to grab this. Are you familiar with this book from Jessica Manson? Mary Shelley's School?
Mary Shelley's. Yes.
This woman being a first-time comic writer, for the most part, I do know she's done some anthologies and stuff, but this is really being her first, like, this is such a good book that is not a children's book in any way. This is I'm going to compare it because of the holiday season with Eggnog. Here's why. Most people you talk about Eggnog, they naturally assume, because they've never had it without rum, right? They think it's an alcoholic drink. They're unaware that
you have to add the fucking rum later.
You got to add the rum later.
Eggnog exists completely outside the alcohol.
Completely outside, right? Yeah, but they've seen it with the Southern Comfort on the side, so therefore, it's already mixed.
Although I will say the Southern Comfort brand eggnog, which is not alcoholic, they just sell it in the grocery store. It's really good eggnog. It's really just good on its own. It's really good. Yeah.
But that's my point is this, you can make this an adult book with just a couple of changes, but she did it to make it friendly for everyone. It's just the nog, right? Which the nog is the best part. And the nog is really good on its own. Like, I love eggnog. I don't need a single bit of rum. Does rum make it worse? No, absolutely not. Rum makes it fine, especially if you add a little Kraken, a little spice rum. It's really good. But on its own, it would be fine. And I think that this book is the eggnog of comics because it is acceptable for everyone. But if you are an adult and you want to take it to those levels and you let your brain take these characters to those levels, it's very well written and very smart.
Very cool. And I will say I've also followed her on Substack as well. And like her Monster of the Week short stories that she writes in prose format, really good. Really? Like she definitely, like, she's got something and she knows what she's doing with these. I'm always stunned. She really does drop one every week. And they're not that short. They're short stories. They're not novels, but they're lengthy chapters of a bigger book where you're just like, wow, she gets into this. And the prose is great. The voice, because it's a spin-off of Mary Shelley School for Monsters. It's one of the characters in there kind of keeping a diary of the different monsters and telling their stories. And so it's being told that way. I have not actually read the graphic novel yet. I have it because I did back the Kickstarter when that was going on for the Mary Shelley. But I need to read that because, I've been really impressed with the prose work she's been dropping on Substack. So I'm like, I got it. Yeah, that's good.
And I put it off for a long time, too, because I knew it was a children's book. I just put it aside and put it aside and put it aside. It's not because I don't appreciate children's book. It's just I write Granite State Punk, and broke down a foot of bodies.
You don't prioritize it as often.
Right. It's not the stuff that I love because you write what you love tends to be a little bit more vulgar and has a little F words in it. It's just what I like.
Ditto. Yeah, I think I have a slight hesitation, even like because it's all ages, which is the phrase which is meant to be. It's not just for kids, right? Because for kids is different than all. It's supposed to be different than all ages, but that gets a little marketing wise synonymous. I feel like people don't separate those two well. So then you always suspect, is it all ages or is it for kids? And you're not sure, and so you put it and so on. So yeah, I'm guilty of that too. But I really want to read it soon because she's been great.
I just met Art Spiegelman and Neil Gaiman, and they did a speaking engagement a couple weeks ago. And he said, he talked about the all ages thing, and he said, because he was so against Mouse being considered all ages, because he was just like, I did not write it for that. I did not write it for schools. Like it's about Nazis. Like, if you're not paying attention,
I'm not sure they can absorb what's right. I'm not sure they can absorb what's happening here in the best way.
And
at certain ages,
somebody stopped him and said, all ages is just a marketing tool to help sell your book. It's just putting in a category to help some guy who doesn't know how to sell your book properly to sell your book. Right. And I love that. It actually made me change my opinion of all ages because it really is just a marketing. You are going, I want to be in this genre, no different than I want to be in the punk rock genre for Granite State Punk, right? Like, punk rock is going to have an F-bomb. Like, it's just got
Right. Absolutely. All right, man. As we wrap this up here today, I think Thanksgiving plans. Are you just you sticking where you are? Are you traveling? What's going on this week?
Yeah, we do it all with the family here. I'll be honest, like sometimes I'm not great emotionally on this time of year because of my mom. So it depends on the year and what's going on and all the extra elements that come with Thanksgiving and families and stuff like that. So we try to keep it very intimate. So if I want to go and escape into a bedroom, you know, I'm allowed to, which is great. I really feel it's a big mockery because the year before my mom died, I said, like in a big gathering of all my friends, I was like, you know, Thanksgiving is the best holiday in the world because it's the one without the bullshit. You just gather with people you love and spend time with. And then, you know, to prove that there is an afterlife and somebody up there is like, I'm going to fuck that shit up real good.
Yeah.
But I still believe it's such a pure holiday. You know, you don't just eat.
It certainly can be. Yeah. It's easy to keep it a pure holiday versus Christmas, which is very hard to keep it a pure holiday of any kind.
Yeah, just don't go out and buy stuff on wait till Friday to buy things like a decent human being. Don't wait. Don't do it at 9 o'clock at night, you know?
Yeah. 100%. All right, my man. Thanks for being on. It's been great. It's been great catching up. I'm so happy we finally talked about Granite State Punk. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time because there will be more.
Yes.
Everyone, once again, go back Granite State Punk 1 through 3. That is all up on Kickstarter right now. And then once again, travisgibb.substack.com. That's Gibb with 2 B's. And find him there as well if you want to get some more backstory of Travis as a writer. He's been dropping some really amazing histories and write-ups and whatnot. Like I feel like you're using that Substack really well as well. So everyone go give that a subscribe. And thanks for everyone who's been watching. There's been a handful of you popping in and out of here, even though you've not been commenting in the comments, but that's okay. I probably wasn't going to pay attention to you anyway. So in any event, goodbye for now, signing off, and everyone have a wonderful, if you're in the States or Canada, although in Canada, they celebrate Thanksgiving, but I don't think this week. I think it's a different day.
October. Yeah, it's in October.
It's in October. Okay, so well past. So anyway, if you're in the States, have a great Thanksgiving. If you're anywhere else, have a great week.
Live free or die somewhere.
Live free or die somewhere.
I don't care where you're at, just live free or die.